So usually when a lot of people are saying that a movie is really, really good, I get a little bit paranoid because when everyone's saying that it's really, really good, you raise your expectations when you're actually watching it. You're like, is it really, really good, or are people blowing this out of the water? And I had a little bit of difficulty finding a time to finally watch the movie because for some reason the times kept on changing. And the time would change like the day before, like, oh, there's a 5:30 slot, and then the next day it's like, there's no 5:30 slot. There's only 2 slots to watch this movie today. So I was pretty irritated because I had to watch the movie at night and then drive home at midnight. But honestly, it was worth it. So there's a lot that I really want to talk about for this movie, but I don't want to spoil anything because I think that everyone needs to go see it for themselves. Because there's a lot of experiences that you get in this movie that really, it's the best experience when you're viewing it for the first time and you don't know that it's gonna happen. So I'll talk about the plot a little bit. Basically, this cyborg girl is found in a scrapyard, and she still has her brain working. So the person who finds her puts her together again and gives her her body. And when she wakes up, she doesn't have any of her memories, and it's basically a movie about her trying to find out who she is and trying to find her place in the world, what she should be doing. And throughout the movie, as she starts fighting, the villains, she realizes that while she's fighting and she's put in a situation where it's life or death, she starts flashing back to her past. And you see that she has a lot of muscle memory going on here when she's fighting. The reason why she can fight in the first place is because she was part of this elite soldier, I guess, sort of military organization of other cyborgs like her. And all the rest of these soldiers have been gone for 300 years. It's actually really interesting. The man who puts her back together, who gives her a new body, it's actually the body that he was going to give to his daughter. And there's a lot of scenes where people are looking at the body and it looks beautiful. It has all these intricate carvings into it. There was a lot of care put into crafting this body. And that's kind of one of the interesting things about this universe is like there's a lot of cyborgs and like robots, and you kind of wonder, I wonder what, like, the cyborg version of a tattoo would be. And that's basically what these carvings are. Like, you got the really cool, intricate carvings on Alita's new body, and then you have this other kind of antagonist character, and he's got, like, all kinds of carvings of skulls and intricate stuff on his back, and it looks really cool. Let me just say right off the bat, the action scenes in this movie, highlight of the movie. The action scenes were so great. Every single time there was a fighting scene, I got hyped up. And honestly, after I left the theater, I kept on thinking to myself, man, it's like, this is what action scenes could be. Because I see so many action movies where the scenes are not nearly as great as the action scenes in this movie. Like, it straight up, it was better than every Marvel movie combined. It was kind of like the first time when I saw John Wick. I was like, man, this is what action scenes could be like. And then I see Alita, and they're not even using guns. They're not even using guns in this movie. They have all these interesting, like, intricate weapons, and Alita's just over here fighting hand to hand. There's also a lot of threat built up in this movie. Like, I found myself physically reacting as I was watching some of these scenes. Like, there were moments where I just had my jaw drop to the ground. There were moments where I was like, ugh. Because every time there was an action scene, I was just so genuinely excited to see what would happen next because they were so beautiful to watch, so well choreographed. Another thing I noticed about this movie is there's not really a lot of gore. And that's an interesting thing to notice in a movie. There's a lot of scenes where somebody, like a real human, will die and the camera just won't show you it. I guess it makes sense because there are some things that you don't want to see. You know what I mean? There's some things that are just too heartbreaking that you just don't want to see. It's almost like the movie knows you don't want to see it. But there's only, like, really 2 scenes, if I'm being generous, where you actually see a human die. And, it's not even really that bad. It's not even that gory even then. But oh boy, when you see robots die, when you see the cyborgs die, that's a whole other story. That's a whole other road to go down. Those cyborgs get fucked up. Another thing is, people who are very big into cinema, they complain a lot about action scenes having a lot of cuts in them. And that's definitely something that you see with, a lot of those types of movies where it's hand to hand. Alita, it had cuts in it, but it didn't have nearly as many cuts as a lot of other movies, a lot of other hand-to-hand action movies have. What you get a lot in Alita is you get kind of a camera panning with the action. And it's not shaky cam. It's not that classic shaky cam. It's like outward and panning with the action, so you get a really good view of what's going on. And every now and then it'll, do a cut, but the cut's not super severe. It's not like 5 cuts in 1 second or anything like that. And I will say, I thought the effects and the CGI work was actually pretty good. I know that when the first trailer or the first poster for the movie came out, people were making fun of how Alita looked. And they didn't really understand that that's how she's supposed to look because she was a cyborg. That's not her real face. It's just how it was crafted onto her. I'm sure that as time moves on, effects are gonna get better and better, and eventually it'll look seamless. But as it is right now, it looks really good. And I almost think that having a lot of Alita being CGI almost helped the action scenes in some way, because there's a lot of flowing, cool movements throughout the fights that you might not be able to get away with when you're using real people to shoot them. I mean, there are some fights where it's like, oh yeah, you could totally have somebody in a suit doing that fight, but there's a lot of crazy flying around, jumping scenes where it's like, yeah, you probably need some special effects to make this work and make it look as good as it does in this movie. Let me also say, and this is gonna sound really weird when I say it outright, but I really liked the idea that Alita had breasts. No, I mean, like, the idea that she has a female figure as her robot body. It's in the background, but there is a theme in this movie of cyborgs trying to keep pieces of their humanity. And that's kind of how I see Alita having this very female, very feminine body. It's her trying to keep that part of her that's human. In her subconscious, this is what she looks like, this is who she is. And they have a few scenes with one of the smaller antagonists, like he puts a lot of work into having a very realistic face, more realistic than Alita's face, because it's just an actor's face put on a robot body. But he put in a lot of money to have that face, and it looks very nice. He looks handsome and everything. And that's kind of the idea of his character, the fact that he very much cares about how he looks. He wants to keep his face, he wants to keep that part of him to look human. And that's why Alita needs boobs. That's part of why I like that whole idea. I like that concept. I like that they have that in the movie, even if it's just kind of in the background. They don't shove it in your face like, gotta keep my humanity, but And as long as we're talking about femininity, we might as well talk about the romance. So I think you could argue, maybe rightfully so, that the romance in this movie was a little bit bland, but for me, it worked. It worked. It did what it needed to do. I think what really sold me on the romance was just the idea of them both being very willing to do everything for each other. Very, very willing to, give your heart to somebody and give everything that you are. And really, that is a big part of romance movies. It's like, what would you do for love? And given that the relationship is a cyborg and a regular human, I was honestly a little bit surprised that they didn't go into the complications of that. They did mention it in one question, they asked, hey, can a cyborg love a human? And the answer was yes, but they don't really explain how would that relationship work. Because like I said before, she has the outline of a feminine body, but it doesn't actually feel like a feminine body. You know, it's hard, it's cold, it's not really something that you caress and feel like attraction towards. And as far as we know, Alita does not have any genitalia. So, you know, how do sex? But they do answer the question yes, as to cyborgs and regular humans can love each other. So I am curious to see how a relationship like that would work out. And the way the movie ends is very open-ended. They didn't really conclude the deeper plot of the movie, but rather it feels like they're setting up for sequels. Possibly we're gonna have a trilogy. Now obviously it could just be a standalone movie and then they could just be like, oh well, if you want to know what happens next, just read the manga. And you know, that could work. But if they don't have a sequel, I'm going to scream. I need a sequel. This movie was too good to not have a sequel. I can't imagine a universe where they decide not to do a sequel. And that's kind of one of the only critiques that I have for the movie is like, I need more. There are a few things about this movie that I feel like should have been focused on more, and I would hope that if you have a sequel, you can focus on those things more. And you know, I do have other critiques. I hardly ever leave a movie and just say, yep, it was perfect, don't change a thing. They're very mild critiques though, so don't start yelling at me in the comments. I wasn't a huge fan of the bar fight scene. I mean, first of all, as soon as they stepped in front of a bar, I was like, man, we're gonna have a bar fight scene, aren't we? The main reason why I don't like there being a bar fight scene in this movie is because bar fight scenes are so cliche. Like, they're in every action movie. It's like, oh, we're going to a bar. It's gonna be a bar fight scene. Every single time you have an action movie where they go to a bar, it's gonna be a bar fight scene. There's no other scene. And bar fight scenes always end the same way. They begin and end the same way. It's like, oh, you get in a fight with one guy, right? And then it ends with everyone in the bar fighting each other. Just everyone in the bar just starts fighting. Oh, who could have guessed that this scene ends the same way? But it's not like the scene was bad. The scene was fine. It's just the fact that it is a bar fight scene that just throws me off. I'm not a huge fan of those bar fight scenes. Let me say this, though. The scene that comes after the bar fight scene, my favorite fight in the movie. Another critique I would have of the movie is some of the dialogue sometimes. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit wonky. Sometimes it actually does feel like you're watching an anime, like a dub of an anime with how it's kind of worded. Actually, yeah, that's how I would describe it. It's like they're mixing the original translation of the manga, and then they're like mixing an Americanized version of it, just mixing it all together in the dialogue for this movie. Because one minute she's like, that was intense, you know, kind of jokey and kind of snarky, and the next minute she's like, you do not deserve such a sword. You know, it's like very, very different changes in moods. One minute you got the snarky American girl, and then the next it's like super Japanese. Dun-dun-dun, you do not deserve such a sword. Honestly, I loved how Japanese it was sometimes. I loved how anime it felt. Some people might be like, have an aversion to anime. They don't really, it's not really their type. They might be a little bit more critical of this movie than I was, but I think they probably could have picked like one way or the other when it came to the dialogue. Is it going to be like Americanized, kind of snarky, or is it going to be like Japanese? Da-da-dun. I mean, in the manga, all these events are supposed to be taking place in America. Like, this is supposed to be the futuristic United States in the movie. So, I know there's always those people out there who are like, oh, well, it's a manga, it's an anime, therefore everyone should be Japanese and everyone's in Japan, and they're not. But no, in this case, they're in America. Gotcha. And I think that just makes it even better that this movie was made in America, because we know what America's like. We got this. Don't you worry about it, Japan. You give us Alita, we got this. And I haven't even, like, read the manga or seen the anime or anything. But seeing this movie makes me want to read the manga. It makes me want to go out and buy the entire series and, you know, find out what happens next, like I said before. And I know that usually when there's a live-action adaptation of an anime or manga, usually the original fans are like, ew, that's horrible. But here in this case, even the manga fans love this movie. So if that doesn't say something, I don't know what will. So I'm gonna support this movie with all my might because I need sequels. I need sequels to this movie. I need to find out what happens next. And I was watching this with Adam. He was blown away by this movie. He was just like, yeah, I think this is my new favorite movie. I can't think of any movie that I liked more than this. And, you know, we also kind of talked about how there's not really that much cyberpunk movies out there. At least not live-action cyberpunk stuff. Maybe we're just gonna have a wave of cyberpunk coming towards us, especially with Alita doing so well among the audience. The people have spoken. This is what we want. I'm gonna be buying the manga series. I'm gonna buy the movie as soon as this comes out on DVD. I'll probably buy two of these movies, give one to a friend. If you haven't seen the movie, you should go out and see it. If anything, for the action scenes. Even if you're not sold on the whole cyberpunk theme, even if you're not sold on Alita, you're still gonna love those action scenes because, holy, it's so good. Anyway, so that's my little review of the movie. It's definitely one of the best that 2019 has to offer us. 2019, as I keep on saying, is a great year for anime. So if you like my little review, smash a like, and if you like the movie, comment below, tell me what you think about it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Program restart.